Today, I want to talk about something that we've been coaching our agents on, and something that we've been talking about over the last, I don't know, maybe 3 4 weeks. And it's really about how we spend our time. And what we know is that we get busy in real estate. We tend to get really busy. We tend to get wrapped up in, oh, I have to run this CMA, or I have to show this buyer. I have to create this marketing and business cards and signs. And there's so many different things in our industry that we have to do. And we get busy doing those things. And yet, when it comes to real life dollar producing activities, working with buyers, working with sellers, writing contracts, prospecting, things of those natures, we tend to push those to the back burner because we're so busy doing other things. So entertain me here for a second. Take out a piece of paper. And write on the piece of paper health. Write on the piece of paper recovery. Write exercise. And write work. Actually, change that. It's going to go relationships, health, recovery, and work. Relationships, health, recovery, and work. Those four. Now, if I gave you 8 points and said you needed to spend all 8 points in those four categories, and you can't use half a point, right? So you can't go 3.5 for relationships. It's either a 3 or a 4. So if you go and take that and spend all 8 points, how do you rate your life, right? So relationships, health, recovery, and work. How do you spend those 8 points? So take a few minutes, don't overthink it. When I look at my 8 points, I spend probably 3 of my 8 points in recovery. I probably spend 2 in my relationships, and so that's 5. And then I spend 2 with work. That's 7. And then I spend 1 in health, right? So when I look at that, that's kind of how I spend my 8 points. But then we started talking about, okay, well, 8 points, what is 8 points? Why does that matter? And arguably it doesn't, right? It's just like a snapshot moment in time. Here's how I spend my 8 points. But what if you took those same 4 categories, right? Health, relationships, work, and recovery. What if you took those same four topics and then said, okay, now you have 24 points, and this is a snapshot of your day. Where do you spend your time? Where do you spend the most time in your day in health, recovery, relationships, and work? So do this activity. Take the time to spend those 24 points to really look at how you're showing up in your average snapshot day, right? It's just like that. It's just a snapshot moment in time here today as you're listening to this, as you're watching this, moment in time of where do we rank ourselves. But as we look at these things, is this really where we should be spending our time? Or is this the best use of our time? Could we allocate time somewhere else? So for example, if we're not having the health that we desire, right? So if we're not living a healthy lifestyle that we want, could we borrow from health? Or I'm so sorry, could we borrow from recovery? Could we borrow from work? Could we borrow from relationships and spend more time on health, right? So some would argue that, I spend an hour at the gym. Great, so that's 1 point. Now, if you also meal prep, and if you also read different things on how to how to entertain your circadian rhythm and all sorts of different things, you can argue you spend more than 1 hour a day on your health, right? Because you're meal prepping and you're reading on the best type of macronutrients and different proteins and different things for your body that you need for your health, right? If looking at relationships, it could just be, it doesn't necessarily need to be you and your significant other if you have one. This could be your work relationships. This could be your personal relationships. This could be, hanging out with your neighbors or your kids, or just genuinely fostering relationships. There are people that are very relational, right? And you know who they are. If you don't, you're probably one of them, right? Where they lead with relationships. These are the people that when they get invited somewhere, they're like, oh, then they get super hyped and they're super excited, right? They spend a lot of time in relationships. It could also mean, time with your spouse or your significant other, your partner. You look at your recovery. Recovery isn't necessarily just sleep. Recovery could be sitting on the couch watching Netflix, right? Recovery could just be zoning out, doing nothing. We did this activity with a small group maybe a month or two ago, and there was somebody that said that they spent 16 hours a day in recovery. And again, no judgment there, right? But if you don't have the results in your life, in your work, and in your health, and in your relationships, maybe we're spending too much time in recovery. And for this individual, as we went through this exercise, they self-discovered that, oh my goodness, I spend so much time in recovery, right? They were big gamers, so they'd work and then they'd play video games and then they'd sleep, right? That's how they spent their time. And yet, from a business standpoint, they didn't have the business results they desired because they spent too much time in recovery. Okay? And again, you look at work. So there are some people that go all in at work, and yet are they actually working? Right? Because if you're gonna spend 8, 9, 10, 12 hours of your time allocated to work, don't you think the results should be there for 8, 9, 10, 12, 11 hours, whatever that is that you allocate, right? It's a great little activity. Again, don't think too much into it. It's a snapshot moment in time. And yet, when we have these results, what we can do now is sit back and look and go internal and say, is this the highest and best use of my time? Could I be spending my time somewhere else? Or does it make sense for me to spend this much time here? Maybe we're spending too much time in health and our relationships are sagging. Maybe we're not spending enough time with our relationships because we're spending too much time at work. There isn't a right or wrong answer here. But what the answer is going to be very apparent to you when you do this activity. So in the comments, shoot me a comment. Let me know what you ranked and if you feel like you're out of whack. If you feel like you're out of whack, we can definitely have a conversation about that, because let's be honest, at Snapshot, we probably are to some degree. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.